Live?
Oh, we're live.
We'll do it live.
You ready? Hey, welcome to the table.
Go again.
Hey.
I'm sorry.
Hey, welcome to the table. My name is Isaiah.
And I'm George.
Are you sure you're George? Jeez, bro, come on, keep up. Here we go.
What?
I'm sorry. Okay,
You do this, dude. You do this every week.
let me try it again.
Go ahead.
Hey, welcome to the table. My name is Isaiah.
And I'm George. What? Oh, y'all got this?
Yeah.
All right.
Not that hard, you guys. Yeah. Bye, George. Okay. Nice to meet you guys. Nice knowing you. Bye, guys. Hey, welcome to the table at Central. My name's Grace.
I'm Darian. And I'm Sammy, and we're here to dive deeper into the themes, stories, and cultures that are central to our church.
Okay, so the season's over. This is our first season of the table, and we did it.
Wow.
Yay.
Yay.
Woo! Yeah. Applause, please, applause. So it's been a great season. If you haven't gotten a chance to catch up, I recommend doing that. And for us, normally we're back there.
Yep.
But that means we get a firsthand look at what God's doing in the room. And that's so special and so significant. And so I wanted to talk to you guys, and I wanted to hear your all's stories and just talk about what we've been experiencing, what we've been talking about. So Sammy, do you have a favorite episode that we've recorded? Or a favorite even sermon series? We've gone through a couple in the last couple months. Do you have a favorite? Can you pinpoint one?
Of course, I have a favorite.
Tell us about it.
We have talked about so many things that have been so fruitful, specifically this past worship series. But I think what really landed with me was the Seed series. And I remember talking to you guys so much about it. I ate that series up for real. But I was actually listening to past podcasts today, which is crazy that this will be like 13, 15 episode. I can't believe that. But I was listening to one where they were talking about the patience that you have to have. And after you've planted the seed and you're sitting here and you're like, okay, Lord, like you told me this is going to happen. So what are we going to do next?
Yeah.
And I think that is just, it was so mind blowing to me at that time, which is kind of dumb to say, but in a way of, at that moment, I had just transitioned out of a season of being in North Carolina. And then I was here and I was kind of like, well, the Lord told me something. So what are we going to do now? And he was just speaking so loudly to me saying like, hey, you know, I do these things for you, but you can't tense up and you can't stay in the transition. Like you have to let go and you have to like open your hands and you have to let me take the things out of your hands. Like you can't shove it in your pocket. I'm not going to reach for it. I'm going to wait until you open your hands and let me take it.
Yeah.
And that was just so hard in that season. And even looking back, I know we talked about this a little earlier, looking back, seeing now how tightly I was holding to the transition and tightly I was holding like, oh no, the Lord told me this. And now I'm graduating next semester, you know, and looking at colleges. And that was something that I knew that the Lord had promised me at one point, but I was like, oh no, that's not what he promised me now.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just the patience. And I cannot remember what episode that was, maybe like episode 6, but yeah, that was my favorite episode.
Yeah, that's good. So from that series, from that time, that was like your biggest takeaway, that patience.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And how now have you seen that like come to fruition a little more in your life? Like, is it easy, like going into this next season, approaching this next season? Do you feel like, okay, like I'm ready to open my hands. I'm ready to do this. Or are you still kind of like working out the tension, working out the stress of it?
Yeah. I definitely think it's still kind of like a working out kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, as humans, we're not perfect, unfortunately. And so I think that, darn, guys.
Sucks.
But I think that there's this verse that the Lord gave me before I left North Carolina, and I wish I could remember exactly where it is, but it's in John, and then he's like, you know, you don't know now what I'm doing, but you will. Mm-hmm. And so he just keeps bringing that back to me of like, hey, like, you don't know, but like, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think I have to take the time every day to sit here and be like, oh no, like the Lord wants me to open my hands. Like what in this day, what am I doing that is honoring what the Lord has given me? I mean, I came back and I was like, oh, I don't really have anything for me. Don't want to volunteer. Don't want to do anything. And George was like, hey, I want to start a podcast. And I was like, okay, whatever, I'll help. And I have been sitting here, and the Lord had not only been teaching me more about him and like literally confining me in a space, being like, hey, dude, I'm talking to you, and you need to listen.
Yeah.
But he's also surrounded me with such like beautiful and amazing people that I trust to tell anything to, and that give me the confidence to sit here. Like when I met George 3 years ago, he wanted me to get up on stage and say like, hey, do midpoint? No. And now I'm sitting behind a camera and I'm talking to you guys about what the Lord is teaching us. And so I think that that is something I have to constantly day to day be like, hey, I'm not where I was 3 years ago. I'm not where I was a year ago.
Yeah.
And that is something that I sat and I was patient for, and that the Lord has shown me like, hey, no, I have this for you in that. But I know that's something that's been for me. Have you guys learned anything based off of like the patience episode or?
Well, something that I'm starting to think about as you're talking about, two things that I'm hearing. I'm hearing time and tension.
Oh, yeah.
And those things for me go together hand in hand, because when I'm moving through time, like I have that same kind of perspective sometimes, or that alignment where I just hold on so tightly to whatever is going on in my day. Like I hold on to it. It feels like things stick to me. And so what I've learned, like to compare to you, what I've learned is to let Jesus hold that tension for me.
Yeah.
And take it to him. Because, and this is something that I was thinking about while you were speaking. It's from George in like episode 4 that I continue to think about every single day. He said Jesus, something like Jesus bridges the gap. He has this ability to bridge the gap between like two contradicting things, and to hold that tension for God's glory. And so that's what I think in my life is, how can I bridge the tension in my life and make it for God's glory, like Jesus, but also during that time, not be anxious about it. Like feel the tension, but more than that, feel God's goodness, feel what he's doing for me, and like have the my eyes on his future for me, but not so far ahead in time that it's all I can think about. And then I forget where I'm at in the moment. And then it's like, who am I? Like, what kind of a life am I living if I'm always living in what is God about to do for me? So I hear you being in that place, those two places at once, where you come back and you're like, I know the future God has for me.
Oh, yeah.
I know it.
Yeah.
But I'm living in the here and now.
Yeah.
And how do I live in the here and now trustfully and faithfully?
Yeah.
And not get too caught up in the glory of what he has coming. But how do I learn the process, what he has in this process? And that's why I love Seeds so much. Is that I think our whole congregation got this concept of process so deeply that we just need to slow down and enjoy these moments, because we're fragile human beings and we just need time for him. He needs time to work it out.
Yeah. Dude, that's so good. I actually, like, in thinking about today and like what we're talking about, everything, my word has been process of like, what have you been learning? Process. I mean, y'all know, everybody in the room knows, but back in late September, I lost my voice, which as a singer and worship leader, that was like a bucket of cold water on my head of like, what is going on? And so like in that moment, like I remember the like, okay, I know that God can heal miraculously. So I was like, all right, God, do it. please do it. Like, I know, I'm like, hello. And it took a couple weeks of being in that season of like, just trying to almost like fake it. Like the good Christian, like, like doing what I thought I should do of like, yeah, but like God's working on it, which is true. Yeah. But for me in the moment and in that space, didn't feel true. And I remember just like when it switched. I had a conversation with a friend and she was like, oh yeah, I just tell God when I'm angry with him. And I was like, okay, like that's not like a foreign concept, but hearing someone like she was being so real.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, I just told God I was mad. And I was like,
You can do that?
She said, "Wait."
I was like, I know, I talk such a big game about like knowing I can do stuff like that and then never doing it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I want to do it, you know, like I want to like think I'm at this like stage of maturity in my relationship that like doesn't require that. But like that is maturity. That is vulnerability. That is honesty. And like, that's real relationship because like, I mean, in our friendships, like if I was mad at one of y'all, I would just tell you like, hey, that made me upset, you know? Yeah. And so to not honor the Lord in the same way or like with the same level of intimacy that I would honor my friends with, it is crazy. Yeah. Looking back. And so like, I remember a couple weeks in, I'd had that moment and we're going through this seed series and we're talking about process and we're talking about, I don't even remember I might have been episode 4 or 5, I don't know. We were in the room and I remember Isaiah asked a question and I wish I could remember the question, but it was something about like, well, what is God saying right now? And I was sitting over there and God, I was like, God, what are you saying? What are you saying right now? And he said, you can't go into the next season the way you came out of the last one. Yeah. And I was like, okay. All right, well then I guess that's what we're working towards. We're working towards what's the change? Like what needs to change? What needs to be adjusted? Because like clearly there's something. And it has been just a beautiful season of like, instead of trying to go around it, which was kind of my like initial plan of like, no, I'll forfeit this season. It's okay. God wants to heal me. I don't need to do all this.
See me on the
I
sidelines.
don't need to do this again. Yeah. And so realizing that like there is so much. Like, yeah, he could do it. Like, he could. Yeah. And surely he will. Yeah. Like, you know, for someone. Yeah. But that was not what I needed to be, like, to just boop, boop, off on, you know? Yeah. I needed to go through, like, 6 weeks of being sidelined and, like, asking the real questions, asking the right questions, and, like, being honest, being vulnerable, and, like, actually making space for the Lord instead of, like, saying I was making space for the Lord or like actually letting him change something instead of just saying he was going to. So in y'all's life, through all of these series and through all of these conversations, have there been like, what have been the practical like takeaways, the practical establishing, like you said, every day you're making space to do that. What about you, Grace? Have there been any practical takeaways of like, how are you establishing that tension? How are you establishing that, you know, making that space for that tension?
I just want to let you all know, Darian and I sat on the floor for 2 hours the other night talking about this exact question. So she's asking me this, but she knows. This is for y'all.
So I want y'all to hear the answer.
So in so many ways. So y'all know I got baptized in May, and I just feel like ever since then, like the spirit in me has been relentless about discipline, and about just washing and healing the things in me that have been just dead and broken for so long. And like things that were dead in me that I didn't even realize I was still hanging on to. Yeah. And so it took first locating them. And there's many more to be discovered, but the first couple things, you know, it's like, how do I use my time? Like, what are the ways throughout my entire day, throughout my week, what am I giving my time to even? Yeah. And that brings like our moment on idolatry, our sermon. Yeah. That brings that into play because that was a big moment for me too. Of like, okay, so now I have a lens to filter things out by like with language. Is this an idol in my life? And using that language is so powerful because I don't want to put anything on the pedestal above my God. So that for me, the Spirit has been working that out in me of like, you spent more time invested in this feeling or this person or this situation this week than you did recognizing God's goodness in your life. Than you did just talking to God. Just walking with him. So sometimes for me, it's just about not running so fast and taking those moments to slow down, where the Spirit is like, that's where the revelation comes to me. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm at peace. Like, I feel good. Because God's just like, all you needed to do was slow down. Jeez. So that's been really wonderful. But day to day, if I were to be specific, like the Lord is speaking to me about, I mean, those basic things of being in the Word every single day is so important. And not just from like a discipline standpoint of yeah, be in your word, like
Yeah.
work towards that relationship. It's not just something to something to take off the task list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I think I had just such a hard time reading the word for a
Yeah.
long time because number one, that's the one thing the enemy wants me to stay away from the most.
Yeah.
So part of that is at war with my flesh
Yeah.
of like I begin to sit here and wonder why I want to be in my word so bad.
Yeah.
I love being in the word, but
Yeah.
why does it feel like such a fight for me? Part of that clarity was like, oh yeah, like it's the one thing the enemy wants me away from the
Right.
most in this world. So that makes sense. That's
Yeah.
one thing that we just realize and then conquer.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is just in general, am I creating the space during my day?
Yeah.
Like intentionally creating the space and then being obedient to it. Having enough self-respect for myself and enough respect for God and fear of God and reverence for God that I will sit down and even if it's just for 5 minutes,
Yeah.
read one scripture
Oh yeah.
and just let that be that because it doesn't need to be I don't need to read the whole Bible in one sitting.
Yeah.
Like cuz that's just me. I just want to do it all and I want to
Yeah.
know it all and I want to be able to speak it all and share it all.
Yeah.
But that's not the process.
Yeah.
That's not how God does things. He doesn't give it all to us all at once.
Yeah.
He gives us things in seasons in pieces
Yeah.
because we need to digest it because
Oh, yeah.
it's life-changing.
Yeah.
It's life or death. It's matters of life and death. So we have to get it.
Yeah.
And we have to be intentional with it.
Yeah.
So that's the piece intentionality,
Yeah.
discipline, and just those daily habits that aren't serving me and also aren't serving the Lord. And then I look at them and I'm like, yeah, that's really silly. Let me give that up.
Yeah.
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 So.
Yeah, I think that that specific message, I remember walking away and I was like, man, what? Because you can't say
Just
that you're
geeked.
not idolizing something. Like
Yeah.
there's like
Yeah.
so many things that you sit there, like self-pity. Oh my gosh. I self-pity 24/7. It's gotten to the point where like I've learned because what is it like if you keep it to yourself, you helped me finish it. You helped me with it the other day. If you keep it to yourself, like the enemy will use it like against
Yeah.
you. He wants you to not share.
Yeah.
And so if I sit here and I'm like, hey guys, like I got real bad FOMO when y'all were hanging out, it keeps me from thinking to myself like, oh, they hate.
Yeah.
me.
You
They
get things in the light. You
Yeah.
expose them. You give them a chance to be aired out and get the truth to them.
yes.
Yeah.
And
when
like
they're
that
in you, they die a lie.
they
Amen.
die. Yes. And you kind of like sit here and you consume yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think like when I left, it really was like eye opening of like day to day, what am I doing that I'm not spending time with the Lord? Even I think it was George's last message where he was like, when you come into worship, are you worshiping because you're like making yourself, or are you worshiping because like
Yeah.
you want to?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I ask the Lord every day. I'm like, Lord, I want to worship you because I love you. Like you're
Yeah.
so amazing and I want to do this. And so what am I doing instead of that that's making me kind of like further away from you? What social media app am I like maybe spending 3 hours on? And I don't
one of
want to tell y'all, but you know, it's just those things of like, what am I doing every day
Yeah.
that's like consuming my mind
Yeah.
over you? And that was so powerful.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so glad y'all brought up the In All Things series. I like one of my biggest takeaways from the podcast is a George quote, not to like hype him up too much, you know. But
let's do it.
was-
George.
But there was this moment. He said it in the podcast. I don't remember if he said it on Sunday, but he said it in the podcast about that week. And he said it's not bad and it's not wrong. It's just not your best.
Yeah.
And I think that like that will change your life to
yeah.
realize that like what you're bringing to God, it's not bad. How you're coming to God, it's not bad. Just may not be your best. Like there may be more for you to. There may be more in you. Like and there may be more ways you can be honoring Him. Like is what you're giving your best.
Yeah.
Like have you made space to give up your best? Are you willing to give up your best?
Yeah.
Because that's hard. Like if you know if you're trying to reserve it, like especially if you got like a scarcity mentality.
Yeah.
You're like I gotta save some of this for me. I gotta save some of this
Yeah.
energy. I
Yeah.
gotta save some of this talent. I gotta save some of this whatever for my stuff, and then not being willing to give it to the Lord and not being willing to give your best
Yeah.
because of what it might cost you. And so, yeah, so I'm glad you guys brought up that series. That series, both of them. I mean, this whole like
Yeah.
this whole year has been great. These last couple sermon series, I feel like
Yeah.
they've really, really hit a very deep place in all of us. Like we talk
Yeah.
about it in the room every week, but in the congregation, like this worship series, just talking about in all things and ending the year that way, I think is so significant.
Yeah.
To close it out and just be reminded that like there's no wrong way to do it. There's no, but like there is a best that you have to give.
Yeah.
And if you open up your hands, like you said, and open up your heart and make the space, be intentional, then you really can, like, you can find him in all things.
Yeah.
You can experience him. He's not limited. He's not scared. He's not
Yeah.
hiding. He is in all things.
Yeah.
If you're willing to open up your hands and be patient, you'll see him, you'll hear him, you'll feel him. So that's so powerful, and I'm glad it's how we close the year. I'm glad it's how we're going into this next year, is just hands open, hearts open, ready to receive, ready to see what God has next, because like if this is what he's done
Right.
this year, this is what he's done in this room in half a year, like, yeah, there's such good stuff coming. So any last thoughts, any last encouragements for the people listening, for the church, for yourself?
Yeah.
Right.
I do. I have something that's been on my mind is 1 Peter verse 2, I believe, when he's talking about us being living stones. And I just keep thinking about that, because without him, we are just stones. Like we truly are. Like we are these like kind of unliving things. And we need him to come make us living stones, like truly, truly alive in him. And I think the way that we do that is exactly by what you just said, is just asking for more and giving more. Giving him so much more than we could ever even imagine giving anyone on earth, giving ourselves, and then seeing how he'll transform it for his glory and for our good. That's what he says. It's not going to be for his glory and not for our good. We might suffer. You might suffer, and that will hurt. Of course.
Yeah.
Duh.
Right.
But like suffering is accounted for as righteousness.
Oh, yeah.
And so yeah, I just think through the season, like as we head into the new year, let's all just turn our eyes to him.
Yeah.
Like, cause it's so easy to get lost in the new year, especially in the race of who am I gonna be in this next year?
Yeah.
What am I gonna do? What's my body gonna look like? Just all of these superficial, idealistic things that, let's be honest, we're probably not going to do anyway. But it's really nice to fantasize about them.
No, I've got it.
Like,
This
it's
is my
really
year.
nice to, yeah, for real.
No, for real, I got it.
Seriously, that's the attitude, that's the culture. But if we can fight that culture of just more from us, wanting more from ourselves, and just being at his feet and being like, what more can I do for you, and what more can I get of you in my life? I think that's how 2025 just like brings revelation to all of us who love him. So
That's so good.
Sammy?
Honestly, the whole time she was talking, I was like, period. I think that's the most amazing way to end this podcast, because I mean, it's true. If like we're not sitting here and we're not locked in on the Lord, like what are we doing? What, like, if we're not doing this right here to glorify him and bring people to him, then what are we doing? So I don't have any like top off of that. That
You
was
said
so
no.
good.
I love you.
No.
To piggyback off that, period.
I knew that was coming at some point. I didn't know when, but I knew a period was gonna slip in.
No,
I
that
love
is-
y'all.
That is so good, and I think, I mean, you summed it up perfectly. Just making that space and making it intentional. And one of my favorite phrases from this year has been to make Jesus the treasure. To make God the treasure.
Yes.
It's not about, like you said, it's not what I can get from him. It's what I can get of him. So we just encourage you to take that into the new year. Catch up if you haven't had a chance to listen to these last couple months of weeks of podcasts or the messages. We've been in some really powerful sermon series. You do not want to miss out, and you don't want to start your year without them. So we thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time at the table.
Bye.